I shared with you a few weeks ago that I really believe that everything that we do on a Sunday morning is driven by one theme, and that is the theme of worshiping God. That everything we do on Sunday should really be focused on that. And so when it comes to Sundays like Mother's Day or Father's Day, or Sundays as we approach graduation, there's always a concern for me of how do we stay true to that conviction in making sure that our primary focus is worshiping God, and yet also address where we are socially as a community. And so as I was really thinking and praying about this, and I knew the series that we were in, and one of the thoughts that started to come to mind is that community is a huge part of the way that we can worship God. Connecting with our community and being in community, and as looking at that and looking ahead for the next few weeks, you realize that on Father's Day, we will not be gathered together at Cornerstone. We will be gathered together with two other churches down at the Mark for church down there, so we're not going to preach on Father's Day. So I thought, let's do something on marriage today. Let's do something the way that we talk about community in the home. Because whether we think about it or not, marriage is a small community. We don't think of that community that we often have within our home. And so this morning we're looking at Ephesians chapter 5, and I love this passage, but I also sometimes cringe when I hear it used. Because there are certain ways that this passage has been used to really push people down, specifically women. And so when I read this, I always pull from the Message, because it shows a much clearer picture of how marriage is to look. Now, over the years, I've had the opportunity to officiate more than one wedding. I've had the opportunity to officiate probably more weddings than I can actually remember. And I enjoy it, but I've noticed a common theme. In fact, I've noticed a couple common themes, and I bet you can imagine. Number one, every couple believes that they will have no problems. I don't know if you've ever worked with engaged couples as they're getting ready to get married. They don't think they're going to have any problems. They think the biggest issue is getting through the wedding, and then it's going to be smooth sailing. Now, for those of us who've been married more than a day, we know that that's not quite true, right? Some of you, are you going to be okay there? Some of you sound like you're really laughing. They really don't think that they're going to have any problems. The second thing is that, and it kind of goes along this line, over the years I've really tried to emphasize that marriage is a commitment that we work together, and that there will be good and bad times in that relationship. I don't think couples hear me when I say that there will be bad times in their relationship. That happens, doesn't it? We have difficulties, we struggle. In fact, in the marriage vows, we talk about for better or worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. And do you know what most of us hear? In health, good times, richer. We miss the other parts of that, because it can be very daunting to think that we are walking into a relationship for a lifetime, hopefully, knowing that we might have troubles ahead. Most of us hope for the good things ahead. And the other thing that always kind of makes me chuckle, that many couples are under the impression that once they get through the wedding, their biggest hurdle as a couple will be over. Now, getting through the wedding, that can be a challenge, but that's probably not going to be the biggest challenge you have, right? It's probably not going to be the biggest hurdle that you have. You know, for those of us who've married for any length of time, we know that those things just aren't necessarily true. There can be a lot of great times, but there can be a lot of challenging times. There can be a lot of fun things, but man, there's also some work. And so when I think of this passage, these are some of the things that start to come back to mind about how, as a couple, we go into marriage assuming it will be one way, and once we get there, we realize that, wow, it might be a little different. And so we're going to look this morning at Ephesians chapter 5, and I'm reading right out of the Message, and that's what your screen version is. So it's Ephesians chapter 5, starting with verse 21. Out of respect for Christ, be courteously reverent to one another. Wives, understand and support your husbands in ways that show your support for Christ. The husband provides leadership to his wife the way Christ does to his church, not by domineering, but by cherishing. So just as the church submits to Christ as he exercises such leadership, wives should likewise submit to their husbands. Husbands, go all out in love for your wives, exactly as Christ did for the church, a love marked by giving, not getting. Christ's love makes the church whole. His words evoke her beauty. Everything he does and says is designed to bring out the best out of her, dressing her in dazzling white silk, radiant with holiness, and that is how husbands ought to love their wives. They're really doing themselves a favor since they're already one in marriage. No one abuses his own body, does he? No, he feeds and pampers it. That's how Christ treats us, the church, since we are part of his body. And this is why a man leaves father and mother and cherishes his wife. No longer two, they become one flesh. This is a huge mystery, and I don't pretend to understand it all. What is clearest to me is the way Christ treats the church. And this provides a good picture of how each husband is to treat his wife, loving himself in loving her, and how each wife is to honor her husband. I love that paraphrase. I love the way that's in there. Perhaps my favorite phrase in that whole section, a love marked by giving, not getting. Because it starts to set the tone of what Paul is really going for, and it shows us the heart of how Christ treats the church and how we are to treat not only our wives, but in the bigger picture, those around us. Imagine if we loved one another and our focus was more on what we can give than what we get out of it. I bet you have people in your life who the only time they come around is when they want something. You know who they are. We don't need any names. You don't have to write it down. But you know who they are. And it gets frustrating because they're only around when it seems like they need something. But then there are those friends. There are those ones in your life who are there with you for thick and thin. Do they get something out of the relationship with you? Absolutely. Do you get something from out of the relationship? Absolutely. It is this love marked by giving, not getting. But I want to go right back to verse 21 because sometimes different translations don't even include verse 21 in this section. But the Message does. And it's absolutely important because it sets the tone of the rest of this passage. So if you look at verse 21, it's a verse that we skip right over. We say this isn't really what even we're talking about because we're talking about marriage in this subject. And most of the time that I've heard this passage used, we jump right to the submit portion. But verse 21 really sets the tone for this. It says, out of respect for Christ, be courteously reverent to one another. One of the first points that I want you to look at today is that community, whether that is relationship, or that is within the church, or that is within our neighborhood, or within our town, it requires intentional effort. Community does not just happen. It requires intentional effort. And most of the time we skip right over verse 21 because we assume that it's not really what we're looking at. It's not really the focus. But there's a reason I'm including it today. Because we are being reminded at the very beginning of this passage that relationships are work. Relationships are work. They require effort. They require attention. They require focus. How often do we hear spouses talk about the fact that we just drifted apart? We got so busy on focusing on the kids that we just didn't spend time together. How often do we hear friends talk about that? Oh, well, we were close together, we used to do a lot of stuff together, and then life just got in the way. I bet we've said some of those things. I've said some of those things. It is easy to get focused on other things. And if we want community with someone, if we want a relationship with someone, if we want to feel connected, it takes effort. And there's another good part in here. And I love that we start out with out of respect for Christ because it really sets the tone. It really gives us the preface of this. Here's what that means. Loving people isn't always easy. Having community isn't always easy. Being married isn't always easy. And frankly, sometimes we feel like other people don't deserve what we can offer. Have you ever felt that way? I am too good for them. See, I didn't say that, I've heard that. But sometimes that's our attitude. Or we deal with someone and maybe we're really frustrated with them because we just think they're being a jerk. That happens, right? And I'll show them, I'll be a jerk right back. Great, now we've got two in the room, that's awesome, right? And that works really well. And so Paul starts out right here saying, out of reverence for Christ, it's not because they deserve it. It's not because you think this. It is out of reverence for Christ. Because of who Christ is and what Christ has done in your life, we treat them well. Not because they deserve it, but because of who Christ is. Now, if we're honest, it's a whole lot easier to go the other route. Well, they're being a jerk, so I'll be a jerk, and there we go. No. If we're in Christ, that's not how it works. And so that is the heading for this passage on marriage. Let me skip right over it. So out of reverence for Christ, community requires intentional effort. Not to just try and get along, but to try and have something that really makes a difference in our life, in their life, and in the lives of people around us. And so, the intentional effort in a relationship, it absolutely begins at the beginning. We are reminded here that to love others, not because they always deserve it, but because Christ always loves us. Every now and then I'll have somebody say, well, how do I forgive someone? How do I love someone? How do I treat this person well? Do you know what kind of person they are? And I'll say, no, not necessarily, and I don't need details. But let me tell you one of the things that helps me when I am struggling to love others. Say, I do this amazing thing where I take a sin walk. Now, I've had to explain this over the years because people have got all excited. This is not a walk where you go out and do a lot of intentional sinning. That's not what this is. This is a walk where you go back through the sins that you have committed. The things that you have done wrong, the ways that you have disobeyed God, the ways that you have hurt others, the ways that you have ignored people. And then we start to say, well, has God forgiven you? Yeah. Well, if God has forgiven you of those things, then we can begin to forgive this person of whatever they have done. When I start to remember, and don't get too excited when I say this, but when I start to remember that I'm not always perfect, and that I'm not always easy to love, it gives me a whole lot more grace to love someone else. Now I want you to say that with me, because you're going to say, well, Pastor James said he's not perfect. Yeah, that's no secret. Pastor James said he's not always easy to love. Yeah, that's no secret either. I want you to say that about yourself. So let's do it together. I'm not always easy to love. One more. Not bad. I think I heard someone else say Pastor James not always easy to love. That could be true. I can guess who that was. But it's this reminder right up front. Out of reverence for Christ. That's why we're doing this. We're not doing it because we're always perfect. We're not doing it because the other person is always perfect. It's never going to be easy. So Paul starts with out of reverence for Christ. This is how you do it. If it was easy, everyone could do it. But it's hard. And so sometimes, a lot of times, to do this well, it takes Christ not only at work in us, but in the other person so that we continue to work together. So community requires intentional effort. That means I'm going to have to be honest about stuff with me. I'm going to have to be honest with others. And look at this and to say, I know that communities work, but I want to be in a relationship with you, so I find a way to do it. Does that make sense? Second thing about community. Not only does it require effort, it requires commitment. Commitment is hard. We commit to things for periods of time, but I'll be honest, I don't want to commit to the same meal over and over again. I like a little variety. My truck is at the point where it's almost paid off, and I'm thinking, boy, it'd be really nice to get something new. My wife's saying no. She's shaking her head no, if you could see her. I've been in the same spot for a long time. Traveling sounds kind of fun. I've been doing this for a while. This kind of sounds kind of fun. Commitment, staying in one place, being focused, being rooted. It is not always easy because the new things, the grass is greener on the other side, right?
Not always.
Not always. Not always, but when we look at this stuff, and we say, it could be fun to go this route. Well, I'll just make new friends and I won't have any problems. I'll just get a new job and life will be better. I'll just get a new house without any problems. I'll just do this and I won't have any issues. No. We can't always just start over and walk away from stuff. A new house eventually has problems, right? A new car eventually becomes an old car with problems. New foods also lose their new appeal. Traveling can become the same old spot. No matter where we go, it has the potential to become old and no longer new. And so one of the things that we have to understand in our relationship is that commitment actually can be exciting. Being together, staying together, and working together and figuring this out can lead us places that we didn't anticipate if we are both working together and following God. Does that make sense? We tend to think that once we get to know someone, once we figure things out, we've got everything all put together and there are no surprises. But I've had some amazing couples around me who said, we've been married for a long time, and there are times my wife still surprises me. We've been married for a long time, and my husband still surprises me. Isn't that cool? When we can be together and do stuff. There are people that say, I've been a Christian all my life, and every time I turn around, God does something new that I didn't anticipate. Commitment can take us to something beyond the new experience. But it takes work. Starting out in ministry and anticipating what it would be like someday to have a family, I was kind of under the impression that it would be easier than it is some days. You guys can laugh if you want. It's okay. And I hadn't put this picture together until I was working on the sermon, but in my mind, the image that I had was of the goose with the little geese following along behind, right in order. And I somehow was under the false impression that that would be life. Wherever I go, I'd have the family in tow, and we would just go that way, and they would follow right along. Less and less do I see life like the line of geese. More and more I see it as like herding cats. I don't know if you've ever tried to herd a cat. It's not easy. It requires teamwork. There are times that Jen and I, it's all we can do to get the kids moving in the same direction. That idea of the little geese following behind, we got to check and make sure they're back there. And as I see every now and then, as I'm driving through town, I'll see Alex out at daycare, and he's walking through town, and the daycare teachers have a rope that the kids have to hold on to. I am impressed that they just have the kids hold on to it and the kids aren't tied into it. Because it feels that way sometimes. The relationships would be so much easier if I could just tie a rope around you and drag you with me wherever I want to go. But that's not how it all works. That's not how we make this happen. And so when Paul is talking about marriage, there's a very good reason, because Paul knows what we all know, that marriage takes work and commitment, and to find a way through it is not always the easiest thing. And so Paul says, let me help you this way. Let me help you understand how Christ loves the church. Not just saying this is how it should happen, but Christ says, I will give of myself. I will give everything I have to make you whole, to make you radiant, to make you beautiful, to make you have an opportunity in an amazing life. And then he turns around and says to husbands, this is how you love your wife. And over the years, I can't tell you the number of times that I have heard people get hung up on the word submit. And it's like this main twitch, big twitch, right? And I've had it quoted to me a number of times. Well, the Bible says wives are supposed to submit. He says, well, my response is always, have you read the rest of the passage? No, it says submit. Well, it says submit as you act like Christ. Well, what's that mean? Let me show you. Let me talk to you about what this means. With the way Christ loves us, I bet every one of us in this room has no issue submitting to Christ. With the way Christ loves us, it is easy to submit to Christ because we know that his love is marked by giving, not getting. When are we hesitant to submit? When we're concerned that we're going to be taken advantage of. When we're concerned that we're going to be abused. When we're concerned that we're going to be hurt. When we're concerned that the person is more focused on what they get from us rather than how they connect with us. That's when we're afraid to submit. We don't want to be around somebody in that capacity. We don't be around somebody who's going to harm us. And so Paul goes on and says, this is what husbands, this is how you treat your wives. You cherish her. Those are good words. Because boy, it is easy to take one another for granted. We lift them up. We dress them. Everything that we say and do is to evoke her beauty. It's a little bit of a rough part for us husbands, right? Are all the things that we do designed to bring out beauty in our lives? But see, that's part of that commitment. And on a bigger scale, it's part of the community. We look at our community and we often see the problems, we see the shortcomings, we see perhaps the crime or the problem with drugs or the problems that exist in our community, and then we sit back and complain about it. And let me tell you, when we sit back and we begin to complain about our spouse, that marriage is in trouble. And when we begin to sit back and just complain about our community, that community is in trouble. When we look at this, part of our job is the commitment that we have to it. And so if we look and we just see the problems and we're not trying to do anything about it, then it will not get any better. Marsha, I was looking at you and thinking of your prayer request with finding out all the ways churches are working together. And how the difference that the faith community is trying to make right here in our local community. It absolutely matters. And it takes all of us working together to make that difference. Working together. Community requires commitment, whether that's at home, within the church, or on a larger scale. And the final point is that healthy community benefits everyone. A healthy community benefits everyone. Again, in the home setting, do you know what a healthy marriage does for kids? It sets them so far ahead. It gives them amazing support and benefits because they have parents who love and who work and are modeling for them what a Christian marriage really looks like. Don't we like healthy friends? I'm not saying perfect friends, but healthy friends. People who can be honest and say, you know what, sometimes I know I'm hard to love. Would you forgive me? I know that I'm not perfect. I know that I made a mistake. I know that I did something wrong. That's a friend we can work with. I know this is an area that I need to grow in. Okay. Let's do that. You know what's tough to work with? I never make a mistake. Or if you'd only get your act together. Or if you would fix this. Or if you would just... No, that is difficult to work with. We see it often in churches. People fighting and arguing, saying, well, the problem is with you, or the problem's with you, and the problem's with you. No. We have to work together in this. Because a healthy community, whether it's in the home, or it's here, or on the greater scale, benefits everyone. And so if we want to see our town begin to change, guess what we do? We work at it. We want to see our church be very healthy, we work at it. We want to see our marriage be healthy, we work at it. I am amazed at the way the churches have come together. There have been a lot of churches that have been tried to merge over the years. And I think one of the differences is that usually it comes from a higher up saying we have a shortage of staff and a shortage of funds, and so now you guys are together. That's not always the case, but I think that's often one. Ours has been very different. Well, we have realized that being together is better than being apart. That we can do more with one another than we can on our own. And as we are mixing together and getting to know one another, we are learning that although neither one of us is perfect, and neither one of us is always right, there's a lot that we can do together that is better now than it was before. And I've shared over the past few weeks that we're at the spot that although we still have not voted, I can't imagine us not being together. And many of you have shared the same sentiments. It's almost as though it has been this way. And it's hard to remember life before. When I think about my marriage with Jen, we have not always been married. But it's hard to remember life before her. Does that make sense? I know it existed. I know I used to do stuff as a single guy. I know I didn't always have kids. But I can't imagine going back to that. And you can say, Pastor Jamey's just trying to score some points. And I am, but they are true. They are absolutely true. And hopefully she would tell you those same things. When I look at Meadville's also my home. There was a time when I didn't live here. There was a time when I thought I might be moving from here. And yet, the further I get on 79 towards Meadville, the more excited I am to be home. And yes, we have problems. Yes, not everything is wonderful here. Yes, it would be nice if we had more shopping and some other activities to do. But it's my community. And if I want to see it be the best that it can be, then it requires my active involvement. And if you want to see it the best it can be, it requires your active involvement. And if you want to see your church be the best it can be, then it requires your active involvement. If you want to see your marriage be the best it can be, then it requires your active involvement. If you want to see your relationship with your friends be the best they can be, it requires your active involvement. You guys are so good. So, even though it's not a direct part of the Apostles' Creed, we believe that community is a gift of God. Because without it, we would be very alone. So what a blessing God has given us, not only in our relationships, but in our communities and in our church. Let's be thankful for all of them today. And if you don't talk to your mom, or you're not able to talk to your mom, or you're not able to talk to a spouse or something along that line, be thankful for the other women that you have in your life. Because they bring an aspect of community that we all need. And since we won't be here for Father's Day, be thankful for the men in your life too. Because we bring a beautiful community together. And if out of reverence for Christ, we treat one another well. Let's pray. Dear God, we just thank you for time together today. We thank you for your blessing of community. God, we thank you for the women in our life. For mothers, for daughters, for sisters, for aunts, for grandmas, for moms who have been spiritual moms, for every relationship you have brought into our life, we just give you thanks today. And God, in the same way, we thank you for the men that you've put into our life as well. Thank you for friends, for brothers, for dads, for uncles, for sons, for grandpas. God, you name it. Thank you for your gift of community. Oh, how we need one another. Thank you for today. Thank you for this opportunity, and we just give you all the praise and the glory. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. A couple of quick